Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
This is Sue Rose Minahan, and tonight is May 2nd, 2020, and we are repeating this on Thursday morning at 6 a.m., and this is Pacific Daylight Time. And on the East Coast, it'll be 3 hours later, and across the world, if you want to find out, just go to Talk Cosmos where you can subscribe, and we have a little calculation for all your times. The fact is that we are in the Taurus archetype, and tonight will be the cosmic collaboration talking about the upcoming nodal shift. Those are lunar nodal shifts, and it's an 18-month cycle. It is a global situation, as all astrology aspects are, but they truly do represent our collective and individual passage from the collective experience that is prominent in our life, that's very familiar, with then integrating the polarity point. So it's really one axis of a direction that we can grow from. And in some ways, this is evolutionary astrology conversation. It's very fundamental to the soul growth of evolutionary astrology, and I find it fascinating. And fortunately, the astrologers on this panel also find that fascinating, and it's always a real event of talking. So just to bring a few focus points, the lunar nodal shift occurs in 2 days from now. That'll be May 4th, and it will be at 29 degrees Gemini, which is 59 degrees, but the time will actually be here in the evening at 10 p.m. 51 minutes. Actually, that would be, no, wait a minute, here, Sue. Yes, that's right. I've got so many little details in different places, and I thought I had this all written down exactly like where it was. So I think at this particular moment, we are concluding the very culmination of the last nodes, which has been 18 months. And so, with no more to say, this is time for the Cosmic Collaboration Panel.
Investigating the deeper questions of this month's archetype and integrating spirit and matter for unified wholeness, this is your Cosmic Collaboration Panel.
I'm Sue Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos, an evolutionary astrologer and consultant, plus a certified color energy coach. I explore creative expression as an artist, a musician, and write abundantly, stories to poetry. I love investigating mythology's language, philosophizing eternity, and I'm a perpetual student of life, seeing oneness of body, spirit of people, animals, and nature.
I'm Shannon Hayes, a certified evolutionary astrologer and consultant, including Mayan astrology. I'm a stargazer, and I work with animal spirit cards. I own a hair salon, and I'm a nature lover, animal activist, and photographer.
And I'm Amanda Pierce, a soul-centered astrologer, astrological consultant, and empowerment-based meditation teacher. I have a BA in psychology, I'm a wellness enthusiast with a passion for healthy eating, and I enjoy creating new realities and shifting old paradigms.
And like the Sufi poet Rumi says, you are the entire ocean in a drop.
Yes, and here we are. And to begin each session, we each present one highlight that might be in our consciousness something of real value to express, which actually, as far as Taurus goes, has everything to say about that, because Taurus is ruled by Venus and it is about values. And for me, I think that change will continue during this time, but it has a different focus. It will integrate a lot of the changes on a mental framework that we're doing, but it's going to be also ideally bringing in some of that emotional experience that we've had so strongly for the last, we're not saying goodbye to our emotions, that's for sure. So Shannon, what would you say that
Well,
would...
yeah, with the nodal change, well, I would say in a nutshell that, eventually we're going to have, I think a lot of it is about information and how our personal information and our beliefs filter into information that we're receiving at this time, and what's really happening, like what is the truth about what's going on in a nutshell.
That says it. And Amanda, what would you add?
Well, hello to both of you this evening.
Yes.
I would say with the shift of the nodes, with the North Node into Gemini, I think it's important for us to all stay curious and to try and shift out of complacency.
Amazing. I just love listening to both of you, the three focuses, because really, not that we're going to end here. In fact, we are going to thread, we had a collective consensus to thread this talk first from tonight's viewpoint, which is on the 2nd, still in the very final culmination of 0 degrees Cancer for this North Node and 0 degrees for Capricorn, meaning the rulers would be the Moon and Saturn. And in fact, the Moon, which is ruling, is in Virgo. So that's a focus, and one of you can jump right in.
Well, I do want to say that, so the nodes tonight at 6 p.m. Seattle time are at 0 degrees Cancer and 12 minutes. So it's so close to moving into Gemini in a couple of days. And it's also to note that the nodes move backwards for those who aren't familiar with the nodes. So when they are moving through a sign, they start at 29 degrees and then go down in degrees all the way to 0. So that's just something to note, because the nodes are theoretical points and not actual planets or celestial bodies.
Oh, I appreciate you identifying that, because I hadn't mentioned that it is the intersection of our orbit with the sun and the moon's orbit, and so it's a astronomical point. Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, since it is like we are still we're at the very end of like this nodal cycle. And I mean, we have this whole coronavirus lockdown going on right now. And you see people like getting frustrated. People are sick of being stuck in their homes. They want to change. They don't want, like, they're tired of government interfering and imposing these laws on them. I mean, how, like, North Node in Capricorn is that, right? It's like people are already starting, like, you're already starting to feel the energy of the upcoming nodes, which I find really interesting. But we still have stuff from the past that we have to bring in and kind of work through, I guess, is what I kind of see with where we're at right now.
That's a really good point, because with North Node being in Cancer, it's such a home focused sign that everybody, has been a lot of energy focused in the home, and that is shifting, and Gemini and Sag are both very expansive signs. So
who would have thought, yes, that these nodes would bring this kind of consciousness? As you say, home has totally shifted to another context than what I would have considered. And that's why I'm glad we are kind of laying out the format, because it's hard to see, as we had agreed, to really understand the next nodes when we're not quite there. We're on the threshold. But we never would have considered that the processing and the personal home environment and our psyche, all these elements of nurturing would have had this kind of dimension. So I look at the new nodes thinking we're going to be taught a lot there too.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's interesting because, I mean, just briefly, I just want to touch on the fact that, I mean, I know a lot of astrologers are aware of, you know, this like the Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto energies that are going on right now too, and how that kind of plays into and affects everything. It's like, you know, everybody was pretty aware of the fact that some major things were going to happen this year, but no one really could have truly really guessed it would end up being like a pandemic kind of situation, right?
Not truly, yeah.
I mean,
Even
you know, astrologers have been talking for years about this Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and not once did I hear pandemic. Come on.
Right.
Yeah, and in Capricorn, I might add to everybody, plus the fact that it was a south node in Capricorn, plus the fact that the planets themselves have their own nodes, and these nodes are meaning intersections, so that interestingly, I think Saturn and Pluto are both at their south node exactly at the same degree that they're in. So the intensity of and people might say, well, what does that mean? Well, sometimes experience is what it means. It's like looking at, obviously, is very crystallized because Capricorn is structure, and that has been with the transformational Pluto and expansion, breaking new territories on this. You're so right. We really couldn't have foreseen the unknown. I think that's part of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and to be hit at such an incredibly deep emotional level, like, I mean, it's rocked everybody's security, including the countries.
Yes.
You know, it's an emotional rocking, and it's a structural rocking. You know, it's like it's yeah. I mean, it's like the whole thing's kind of blown up, and now we're going to have to try to figure out where we go from here.
Well, looking then. Oh, go ahead, Amanda.
Well, I'm just going to make a little segue into the fact that this looks like it's probably the start of, well, maybe not even the start, but an intensification of the Pluto return for the United States. You know,
it is in a plateau, yes, in incremental stages, and that's exactly so right. It's like everything; it's one long flow and one long story. Well, remembering that right now the moon is in Virgo, so we're analyzing. That's what Virgo does, and we're looking at it from a standpoint with these, looking at the moon also, and that's a good reason to be looking at the moon because the moon is the ruler for the North Node. However, looking at this next chart, which is in 2 days, and looking at just as a seed idea that it's the initiation of this time, which again is going to be at 10:51 on the 4th p.m.
On the 4th,
or in the East Coast it'll be at 1:51 a.m. So
10:51 Pacific time. Yeah.
Yes, daylight time. Thank you. Yeah. Right. So in other words, and that's where the moon, it's a bucket, you know, it's a bucket. Edmund Jones.
Mark Edmund Jones.
Mark Edmund Jones. Thank you, because there is a current at Mark Jones, well, you know, as an astrologer. That he designed these ideas of the patterns, and a bucket has a handle, and the moon, interestingly, is still the handle here. So there's a lunar emphasis.
But it's moon in Libra.
Right. And so she's looking at the same as the sun and Mercury in Taurus. They're all looking to Venus. That's in a square, that's tension to Neptune, meaning that, you know, I'm just threading some lay work here so that you're kind of threading in things that you've said, is that we have somewhat of a set concept, you know, in the middle degrees of Taurus, but we're looking to what is the well, one thing is looking from Venus standpoint, what's the partnership? Because the moon, this bucket handle, is looking at relationships and the spirit. I mean, this is jumping. There's many other factors here.
Right. Well, I would say the other thing it's looking at too is like the moon in Libra is also a projection point. So we have things going into air. Libra's an air sign. Air and fire. A lot of things are moving from earth and water into air and fire too. So we have an element change. So, I mean, for me, like a lot of the air and fire stuff is about projection more even
true.
than relationship, only because of like with the air and all the information with the Gemini Sag, like, it, there are a lot of projections, I mean, and it's in, if you're looking at it from an Aries chart, and the moon is in the seventh house, like you have that opposition, right? So you have
Yes.
the opposition is also about projection. And it's about, it's right now what you see with a lot, what I think of when I see like the whole projection thing is a lot of the people that are upset and they want to go back to work, and they're storming places with guns in their hands and stuff because they don't want people telling them what to do. They have their own ways of thinking and their attachments to their belief systems. They want to go to church, like all this like
Attachment.
kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, moon's attachment. That's right.
Yeah, moon's
Now,
attachment.
Venus and
Absolutely.
Mercury are in each other's signs. In other words,
Yes.
Venus is in Gemini, usually ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is in Libra. They both rule two signs, as we know. Venus has Mars. I mean, not Mars, has Taurus and
Mercury's in Taurus.
And Mercury's in Taurus, and it is ruling that north node.
Yes.
So quite important. And it's there at 15 degrees Taurus, conjunct the sun at 15 degrees Taurus. So that's a lot of Taurian energy. And when you're looking at a shift into Gemini, a Gemini north node ruled by a Mercury in Taurus, there's going to be a lot of thinking around survival.
Yep.
Around what are my values going to be? What kind of resources do I have, and what resources do I value now?
Yeah.
And it's still, I mean, it's still conjunct Uranus at 7 degrees, or there's an 8-degree difference. It's a wide conjunction, but it's still there, and it's
absolutely
picking things up for sure.
It wants authenticity, absolutely.
Well, yeah, and I mean, Uranus usually wants things done pretty quickly too, but with the Taurian energy is yin energy, and it doesn't want things fast. It wants Taurus is also about momentum, so it doesn't want things to happen fast. It needs time to figure things out.
That's exactly right. And it's also the body with all our senses. And I was just listening to a talk today, and it brought up the fact, actually with the other Mark Jones here that's in London, and many astrologers know, and he was talking about Venus, and it brought up the idea of, I think it was that talk anyway, about listening. And I realized that's right. It's the body, but it's all the senses. So seeing, because art is huge, it's a pre-verbal sign. Listening, music's also a huge sign. But this aspect of listening, because one person was saying that she actively listens. She has a hearing problem, so she really actively, rather than passively, listens. In fact, it was a different workshop. It wasn't Mark Jones. But the fact is that seems to me to be key here, because Gemini communicates, and listening needs to be part of that exchange. So,
right, and especially with a Libra moon, where often there can be projection, but there can also be really looking to the other for information or for how to proceed, and giving the other more more power than maybe they often deserve
Oh,
in
yes.
a way. And so that, but in a way that can work towards the listening.
Right.
Listen to others.
Right.
On-
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, and it's looking for a balance, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the only way you really find balance is by having another perspective and by actually being able to hear that perspective. Because you can't really change things if you have, if you're not really paying attention, it's hard to change anything.
Yes. And Libra is pretty good at seeing multiple sides. Sometimes
Right.
it can see too many sides and have trouble picking one. But
Right.
it's nicely aspected to Venus here in this chart. It's in a trine to Venus. So that's a supportive energy. And we really are going to have a very Venus focused year, with Venus turning retrograde soon and being in Gemini for quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be in Gemini for a while.
Yeah, it will give Mercury a lot of energy, looking to the North Node and integrating that part.
Yeah.
And, when you talk about the other person and giving power and that, it reminds me too that, the pros and the cons is one way of putting it, or the shadows and the empowerment of every sign. And so, on one hand, Libra is well aware that they're not quite enough and they need to have a partnership, and that, can complement what they're doing. On the other hand, there is that side that you were bringing up where one feels insufficient to the point that they just either think somebody else is doing what they don't see about themselves in a negative way, or they also see somebody else doing all the great things that they actually do, but they don't see that in themselves. Either way, they give away their power. And so relationships are going to be, I guess, the name of the game when you really think about Gemini anyway, because we haven't really gotten into Gemini, which we will later. But
yeah, and it's interesting that that Venus is conjunct the North Node in this inception chart. And just for those who aren't familiar with what we're talking about in terms of the chart, this is like the inception of the North Node moving into Gemini and the South Node moving into Sagittarius. And the idea is that the energies representative in that chart are going to be played out throughout this transit. And so it's transiting for 2+ years. I think it's like 2 years and 4 months or so.
January 18th, 2022.
Yeah. So all of the energies that we're talking about now, we are going to be watching for in that period.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
thank you for that, because really it begins with the idea, like right now, as we had said, we're talking from the lens of the last culmination of the moon-ruled Cancer. And
Right.
so what we're saying is that from that platform, we're looking at the new platform, and it will evolve and change and grow in dynamics. But yet where it starts is so similar to this whole idea of the South Node that we're coming from at every time, because we have to have some place to come from. You have one port before you go to the next port,
Yeah. Well, I know, and Gemini is also about, like, the different parts of things, the different pieces, right? So, I mean, it's also being on the North Node, it definitely talks about, like, you need many different pieces and many different parts of information to create like a bigger picture of things. So it also kind of, I mean, the moons that will, the moon definitely will be in Libra, but I mean, the moon moves pretty quickly. So you kind of get like, it just kind of is like a brief sort of validation of, like,
Yep.
have, like we were talking about with perspective and stuff.
Kind of symbolic, right?
Yeah, it's just kind of symbolic. I mean, but it's really quick. But the interesting thing, though, is that, I mean, it's going to, that Gemini archetype with Venus and with the nodal axis is going to be going on for quite some time.
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
Yes.
I actually, now that I'm looking at this chart here with you tonight, and this isn't the first time I've looked at it, but I'm seeing it quite positively. There's a lot of really nice connections. There we've got Venus conjunct the North Node, trining the Moon, which is the bucket of, or the handle of the bucket. Venus is also trining Mars in Aquarius, and the North Node is trining Mars in Aquarius.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting that we're at this point in the pandemic where, at least in the United States, we're looking to kind of try and come out of it, or like get a handle on it in some areas. And Gemini is all about data. It just loves information and gathering data. And so I think in this 2-year period, this is going to be a big focus. And
year and a half.
Yeah.
Not a surprise at all, but it's just really fascinating to see that come forward. And not only is Venus conjunct the North Node, but conjunct Venus is the asteroid Hygeia,
Right.
which has to do with hygiene and health and wellness.
Right.
And conjunct Hygeia is Vesta, which is all about like
Asteroid.
the sacred flame. Yes, Vesta is an asteroid. Thank you. And it's the sacred flame, and it's like where you find your fire in life. And so here we've got Hygeia exactly conjunct Vesta at 17 degrees Gemini. And it's just showing like where our collective focus is going to be and what we're really valuing with it conjunct Venus.
Right. And being in the middle of like, or being at kind of really at the beginning of this whole coronavirus thing, since this is like, probably one of the biggest first times that, our countries had to deal with something like this. It's all very new, right?
Yeah.
Other than like the 1918 pandemic, but this is something huge, like you're saying with the Hygeia conjunct the Venus and everything. It's and Hygeia also is an asteroid, but and like Amanda was saying, it has a lot to do with health and wellness, and it's really strong in this
healing
part,
yes.
right?
And healing. I'm so glad you're both bringing that up. And as far as aspects in this chart, amazingly, it's not as many Ptolemaic. That's PTOL.
Oh, Ptolemaic aspects.
Yes, which are for other people, it's the hard aspects, the conjunctions, the squares, the oppositions, and that. But there's a lot of septiles and quintiles, which an astrologer, Rick Levine, here in the Northwest often talks about. And so it's curious to kind of begin to learn what they are. And also David Cochran, another astrologer that has vibrational astrology, that has second year of his conference, and a few weeks ago, in fact, that was online, like so many of them. But the fact is that they're introducing more of these aspects, is what we call them, these mathematical ways of dividing and connecting different energies. And so getting back to the quintile, which is a cooperative energy, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I can see that, like you're saying, Amanda, there's all these, some trines, but also it's a flowing chart where the possibilities are with quintiles. I think that the opportunity is there.
Well, and quintiles are very creative.
Right. But it is where we have to make it work. But the opportunity is there. And so it can happen. And the septiles are more fate driven. So with that, but the fact is that it's energetic, but a little different than how we've been operating. Whoops. There we are. I guess we'll be back. That's right. This is a Cosmic Collaboration with Amanda Pierce and Shannon Hayes on May 2nd, and we'll be right back. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We're currently in the period of Taurus. By leaving a cycle based upon initiation, the energy of Taurus integrates spirit into a solid form of matter,
that is tangible and physical. It's an earth sign, concerned with self-sufficiency and the values to maintain the strength of a life form throughout its survival.
Greetings. This is Dana Bernbach, evolutionary astrologer, and you are listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we discuss the zodiac, our connection to it, and our roots in the stars.
Make it a great day. Keep your dial on Alternative Talk 1150.
Well, hello again. This is the Taurus Cosmic Collaboration on May 2nd, and we're talking about the nodal axis shift happening on the 4th, where the North Node is going to be in Gemini, ruled by Mercury, and the South Node is going to be in its polarity opposite of Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. And I think now we will begin talking about what really Gemini and Sagittarius, Mercury and
Jupiter.
Thank you, mean, because it is the, yes, it's like, oh my goodness, a whole family here. What are the new names? And really, it's the mutable cross. There's always 4 in every, because it's elements. And so Pisces and Virgo are pretty potent. In fact, well, we'll bring it up later, but I think the generation with the Virgo Pluto is going to be really a potently activated during this cycle. But let's talk about Jupiter and Mercury, or Sag and Gemini.
Well, I think the one way to talk about the energies of the nodes, I know you're not asking specifically about the nodes, but I'm just going to put
Sure.
this is to think of traditionally the North Node has been called the dragon's head, and the South Node has been called the dragon's tail. And at the North Node, you're bringing in information, and you're just like, it's just constantly coming in. And the South Node, you are eliminating the information. So, and that information can be stuff or not necessarily information, but the energy can be waste that's no longer of use to you at all, or it can be gifting as well. So it's like the dharma that you're giving out to the world, the good work, the gifts that you have to share. And so with a North Node in Gemini is all about gathering data and being curious about new things. And so that's kind of where we're going towards, what we want to have a little more focus on.
Yeah, and I'd say that the purpose, one of the purposes, because South Node really in Sagittarius has a lot to do about belief systems. Sagittarius has a voice, and it builds through higher education, through philosophy, through religion, through other cultures abroad. I mean, it's many aspects, but one has developed a belief system. So immediately speaking, the Gemini, which is, and it could be set, it could be formed, and yet introducing new information, teaching or classes, the neighborhoods of people, the siblings, neighbors, it brings in another perspective, which Sag loves. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And since Gemini is like the data collector, right? Gemini likes gathering up all the information so that the Sagittarian develops, like you were saying, a belief system, but also its own opinions. Mm-hmm. So Sagittarians can be very, that energy can have strong opinions about things, which a lot of this too, it's like, I think a lot of the combination of these nodes, it's like gathering opinions, gathering information, forming opinions, and then actually seeing how those opinions and all the data work, right? So we're in a place, coming from a place where a lot of this stuff is new, and we're sort of feeling insecure about everything. So a lot of it is, gathering up information. And then you have, the Aquarian energy as well, the Uranus and Taurus. So it's like, seeing what works, right? So you have all this new information coming in, and you're working with science and everything else. So you have to, like, it's also a lot of, getting your hands dirty trying to figure this stuff out.
Well, ideally that is always.
And no, go ahead, Sue. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, Amanda.
Oh, I was going to say, and being open to discarding belief systems that no longer.
Yes, that's it. Or revising them, just interjecting a little bit more awareness, because so often when, like, for instance, Helen Keller, she pops in my brain. They thought she was deaf and mute, but until Anne Sullivan came around and taught her how to read, Braille and language and words, and she wrote books. I mean, Helen Keller ended up reading books. So in other words, we think animals are dumb because they can't communicate to us because we can't communicate to them. Boy, I could get on a big one.
Well, yeah, exactly. But it's just because we haven't bothered to do the work or to actually learn. I mean, that's what a lot of that is. That's what I mean by, like, data collection and stuff. It's like, you have to have the curiosity. You have to have the desire to figure things out in order to make changes,
Ooh, and another thing, if I might say, though, because it is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is the quickest little, besides the moon, which we've been experiencing, but the moon is more reflective and emotional, and Gemini, ruled by Mercury, is more duality oriented. Because Castor and Pollux, the twins, one was mortal, one was immortal, and they went between matter and spirit. So many ways, it's this duality. But life is going to be changing on a pretty quick basis. I mean, change is really the evolution of change, which is what we were saying about energy never gets destroyed. In our little rah together mantra, right, as we entered, it only changes. And it's going to be quite, even without us seeking change. That's what I'm trying to present.
Yeah, and the nodes are shifting from Cancer Capricorn, which is the cardinal energy, which is action oriented, into Gemini Sag, which is mutable. So it's all about flexibility
and integration.
Integration, yes. And you can look at Gemini. Gemini is all about duality, but there can be a need to integrate that duality or bridge the duality.
Yes.
And with that, when Sag can get really crystallized. Like, it's a mutable sign, but it can get almost fixed feeling in a way. And when it's associated with the South Node, you can see that a little bit more. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it can be so attached. I mean, the nodes also, it's emotional energy.
From the moon.
From the moon. Exactly. It's the moon's nodes we're talking about. So there's a lot of attachment there.
Yes.
And a lot of, like, opinions we've come in with, a lot of, like, philosophies, a lot of, everything. The belief systems, the people out in the street protesting because they want to have their churches and,
Yeah, and it when it gets crystallized, it's because people think they know the quote unquote truth. Like the truth.
Well, it is an interesting factor too, that looking at this axis, which has everything to do with the communication they both have a lot to do about thought in different realms, in a sense. I mean, what I'm getting at, because when Gemini is a communication, whether it's writing or many different forms of communicating, connecting, and finding out in its environment, labeling, and etc., is one factor. There's depths too. But with Sagittarius, is what we're talking about here, has a voice. It's like Maurice Fernandez, which is a teacher of several of us here, says that with Sagittarius, that's their purpose, is to have a voice. So it isn't just communicating. That's what I'm getting at. And unfortunately, that voice can be so righteous, as we've on the shadow side, where it's not listening. So I sure hope that this seed chart, does
managed to introduce the need to use the ears.
Yeah. Yeah. No, well, yeah. I mean, the South Node in Sag, I mean, it can get so hung up on like, it's on absolutes. Sagittarius, like it does, it can get stuck in its own belief system, and that that energy is what it is. It's the ultimate energy when, I mean, everything changes.
And I guess, too, when I think about the rulers, maybe going back to the rulers, because the natural ruler of Sagittarius is Jupiter, and it's a faith based energy. It's just before, it's the biggest planet out there. I mean, all the planets could pile into Jupiter, although it's gaseous, and it's just before Saturn, and it has a lot to do about faith. So people, can
and it's in Capricorn in this chart.
Yep.
And Capricorn's very traditional, and so
yep.
we're going to continue to see people having a hard time letting go of how things always have been.
Good point.
Also, showing up with the Uranus and Taurus. I mean, Taurus likes things the way they are, doesn't want to change it, and Uranus is just going to shake it up. It's happening. So
it's staying there, for 7
yep.
years.
And
yep.
in a little bit of a challenging position because it's conjunct Pluto in Capricorn in this chart.
But dynamic, yes.
I do like that Saturn has moved into Aquarius. It's going to retrograde and go back into Capricorn in a little bit. But in this chart, at least, Saturn is in Aquarius, and so it's kind of supporting that newer airy energy that we've got with the Gemini North Node. And I'm calling on Saturn because Jupiter in Capricorn is ruled by that Saturn. It's doing Saturn's bidding.
Good point to bring that out, because it is the ruler, just to kind of rethread this and think this, of the South Node. And that conjunction with Pluto is 3 times this year. It's going to be on June 30th next. It was just a little bit ago, and then it's going to be way much later, I think on November 12th. And it's a real signature of huge change. This whole collective theme, like we were talking, nobody could have perhaps seen it, the possibility. But, back in 1522, there was a very similar chart, and it was, that wasn't, it was during the plague, but there were other historical times that with that 1522 was more, there were things, one element that happened in 1522, besides Magellan coming back to port, he didn't, but his ship did, and then also with the Gutenberg, which had been the press, which had been years before, but Martin Luther printed his translated New Testament, which brought it to the people, which is faith bound. But the other was that I think Cortez went down to the Aztecs, and I think of Music Man, did a man, what's that musical a long time ago, oh boy, with Rex Harrison and everything. But anyway, unfortunately, all the Aztecs died. So, the toxins, I went off on a little thing there, but yes, Jupiter and Pluto.
Yeah, well, I know. And they're going to be going retrograde too. I mean, there's going to be a lot of stuff that's retrograde, So, I mean, this energy, it's like, and what you're talking about, the only reason I mention this is because, you're talking about the Jupiter and faith, and, when we were talking about things being absolutely true, and, the opinions, how opinionated it can be. I mean, it just keeps talking and repeating patterns, I guess, all throughout the summer into the fall, and even like, the next couple of years of us going through points where we think we've got things down only to find out that we don't. I mean, I think it's going to be really up and down, and like Yeah, there's going to be a need to like be flexible in our thinking and to keep being curious, because it's going to take a while too, if we're talking about the coronavirus, on finding just the right vaccine.
Yeah.
You know, and as long as we have somebody, you know, in the White House that we do, and I won't go on in that, but you know, who's in total denial about how things really are, you know, it could take longer than people think, you know. I mean, it's just something to be aware of. I'm not saying that it's absolutely true.
Well,
either.
we're in a new
You know,
process. You're
we're in a
absolutely
new
right.
process.
And I
Exactly.
like what you're saying about the flexibility and the curiosity. And it's really also to remember, because it is true, we can get kind of slanted on one and we're trying to bring in the whole positive, because there's always that. In fact, there was a little video that came out about a man that was reading to his son, and it was a poetical.
Oh, I
Great.
saw that. Yeah,
Wasn't
that
that
was
charming?
great. Yeah.
And he was saying how, well, we had days of waste and we had days of luxury and all these factors. But the fact is, bottom line is that there was a new day, and the new day is actually pretty good. So, meaning that we're in this mental, flexible, beliefs oriented, but yet expansive way of reconnecting with our philosophies, and really learning maybe to use the true spirituality of, you know, going back to that Venus square of our heart, of our desires, right, with Neptune.
Venus or Neptune. And I just wanted to bring that up too, in regards to what Shannon was saying about how we may think we have things, know where we're going with things, and then all of a sudden we don't know. This Venus square Neptune is exact at 20 degrees.
Right. Exactly.
And Venus is square the nodes as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, not Venus. Neptune is square the nodes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's one of the most challenging points in this chart, is that Neptune in its own sign of Pisces, and kind of making it a little more challenging for us to know whether the information we're getting is good or not.
Well, it dissolves things in Pisces, and it also brings us to the spiritual, and it also
causes like chaos and confusion too. Like it can make you think, you know, you can like think and want to believe that everything's going to be okay, and then you have to be careful.
Well, because, I think,
you know, it's like you don't really know where we're going, where this is going. And I think people are starting to get a little bit optimistic right now. Like that's my only thing.
And with the nodes shifting from Cancer Cap, more home-based, into the expansive Gemini Sag, people are going to want to get out there, and people may think that they're safe to congregate with lots of people, and because it's so, Venus is right there, you know, it is all about relationships and really wanting to be out there.
Well, we need relationships, and we are touchy-feely people. It's true. Exactly. But going back to Neptune, because it is applying, and I can see that point of what you're talking about, because remembering with folks here that the nodes are going to be slowly in this 18 months, it's a year and a half, in a sense, going from 29 down to 0, and Neptune is a very slow planet. I mean, it only goes a few degrees every year, and it still has about 7 years or 6 to go, or 6 at least. But at any rate, so it's at 20, but it will be continuing in that square, meaning that there is confusion if a person looks to get things defined and to be the definer. But if one really partners with the idea of the unknown and of spirit, and recognize that there is another source, the ether inside of us, the source inside that we are meditating with at home here, perhaps, and to realign, and perhaps also to use other forms of communication, because if you combine Mercury, Gemini, with Pisces, you come up with song, you come up with dance, you come up with music, and that's so unifying. It's so liberating.
Right. And that's a great way to use that energies. So instead of falling into confusion and overwhelm, which could be, I mean, it's going to happen for some people and to the best of us, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the square, it's a dynamic energy. And so it's trying to get us out of our defaults, which isn't working. And so that's a great way to get really in touch with your own inner knowingness and doing that in creative ways, potentially. Another thing I want to mention about that Neptune is that Neptune can dissolve boundaries.
Exactly. So yes.
This goes back to that thing.
That's what I said.
Be a little bit careful with social interactions.
Right.
We don't know where things are going at this point.
We'll find new directions.
A lot of people are wanting to get out so bad. Like, I mean, eventually, it's like they'll, a lot of people are already trying to like make this, a spiritual adventure for themselves. But then you also have, a lot of the collective consciousness is not that. So, I mean, you have to like weigh it out. You have to be careful with these energies, because on the one hand, you're going to want to, you want everything to be okay. You want to like look to the bright side, you want everything to be great, but you have to be careful because we're not done yet.
Let's go back.
These energies are still pretty new.
We only have a few minutes. Let's go back to the curious part, okay? Because you're right. You're both right. But the fact is, we're talking 18 months. And also, sorry about this outside. But the other thing is, just looking, and this is answering what several of you are already saying, and that is that, for instance, little free pantries help to, and I'm looking at articles in the paper, to battle food insecurity. That's where those little free libraries that are all over the United States, I have one right outside my door, are giving food. Another one is where sheltering in place, our inner poet soars. It's already happening. Another one is where there's, keeping in tune online. Professors' free daily video sessions are geared for students. And he's a cello player.
Oh,
it's
I know.
marvelous.
People are doing some really cool stuff.
And this is what because we only have a few minutes here. We need to like finish on that kind of thing, because the point is that if people think that, well, it's going to be this way and it's good. No, it's going to be different. We're mutable now. And it's a trickster thing too. Mercury,
that's
what
I'm
see and what you got.
Exactly.
And so,
I mean, Neptune throws the trickster energy onto it.
That's right.
So
and
that's
so
all
grab it, embrace it, and move with it. Yeah.
Well, and be careful. You have to think too. It's like, I mean, there's all that Gemini energy. I mean, you got to think.
Well, we'll have time for that, but I think as we're still kind of, it's true. I mean, yes.
And be open to shifting gears when
exactly.
And when you shift gears, just continue that curiosity into, how can this work?
Exactly.
And that will keep us, in a better frame of mind. Because with Uranus and Taurus, shifting is happening.
Well, I mean, and it's challenging because it's a new direction. So, for the better and the worse and everything in between. I mean, life has changed, and that, you just got to be flexible.
I was just looking at a little article in today's paper about how, because families are home. At first I thought, oh my gosh, they left their child at home. No, it's like the parents are home and the kids home, but they're hiring like wouldn't call it tutors, but they're guides. They have certain names, but they stay with the child, a little child perhaps, on the iPad or something, going over something, but they can watch their face and all of that.
New ways of teaching and communicating information.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I have a sister, and I wish I had the name of it. It's with Bellevue Community College. I think it's going to be Nana something, but she taught with their program, the young 3 and 4-year-olds. And so she needs to keep on their, in their payroll system, and to help the students come up with these little tiny YouTubes. And so it's burgeoning online.
Oh, online. Exactly. A lot of stuff's going online, astrology conferences, learning online. I mean, I mean, it's another like global way of keeping in touch. Granted, it's not so Taurian, but it helps.
It is
Yeah.
Aquarian.
Yep.
It is. Now we have about, still a good half minute with this lovely music, because I was looking at the clock going, oh my gosh, what a quick hour. And you know what? That must be, we're really getting in touch with Mercury, because it's going to go like change, quick. And you've both
Right?
been, this has been the Taurus Cosmic Collaboration with Shannon Hayes and Amanda Pierce and myself, Sue Rose Minahan, on Talk Cosmos, May 2nd and on the 7th in the morning. And do subscribe, find out when we're happening. We'll be every month. And this has been about the nodal shift that's headed up, that there'll be so much more to talk about. And it's been great. Next week, we're going to continue with the Taurus energies, and we'll just find out what happens there. So thank you both so much. And I think we have maybe...
Thank you.
Next month.
Yeah, I wish we were together.
I know. Thank you, though.
Yeah. All right. Blessings to all.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.